We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special Christmas edition, we raise a cup of good cheer and examine the very best and the very worst of 2022, and hopefully have a little bit of fun along the way. I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to our listeners out there in America and indeed around the world. A very Merry Christmas to you and to your families. On today's show, we have a special panel to discuss everything political, media, and hope related. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. With Christmas upon us, it's impossible not to reflect upon the year that has passed, and of course, it's time to evaluate the adventures and exploits that have moved us so much. With this in mind, we're fortunate to be joined by our special Liberty Nation Christmas panel that comprises Editor-in-Chief Lisa K. Donner, national columnist Sarah Cowgill, and Legal Affairs Editor and regular guest on our Talking Liberty segment, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza. Welcome, panel, and may I say, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I feel the cheer already. So, panel, I'm very grateful to have you all here. And I want to kick this off by asking you what you thought was the most significant happening this year. How about you start us off, Lisa?
Well, I really went back and forth on this one. When you told me we were going to talk about this, I thought, isn't it? Because it was so expected. It was so anticipated. Graham Noble wrote a great article about it. But I have to say that, in my estimation, even though we knew it was coming, the biggest story of the year is the J6 committee referring Donald Trump to the DOJ for criminal prosecution. Basically because it's historic. I mean, if you look at the rundown of other presidents and, the hot water they got into, you basically have Ulysses S. Grant, who was arrested for speeding in his horse and buggy.
He's a class act. He's a $50 guy. $50 guy.
But the police let him off with a fine. Then you have Spiro Agnew, and we'll talk a little bit about that Hugh Hewitt article in a prominent Washington newspaper later. But he resigned in 1973 after pleading, as our ESQ, Mr. Cosenza would say, nolo contendere, which is no contest to a felony tax evasion charge. And then, of course, there's Richard Nixon, who was famously by a grand jury, was an unindicted co-conspirator. Sorry. So, Trump really, he doesn't have the indictment. He's just been referred for the indictment. But it is pretty historic.
Yeah, that's definitely a big story. And as you mentioned, we will be talking about Trump's travails in the later segment. It's really one of those ones that's captivated America. Now, how about you, Sarah? What story has glued you to the digital broadsheets this year?
Well, honestly, I mean, I agree with Lisa to almost 100%. It is historic to see what's going on with former President Trump, and he's just a flashpoint. I've never seen anything like this in all the years I've covered politics. But I do believe when it comes down to it, the biggest story is Twitter, and the Elon Musk is playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. I mean, he is 10 moves ahead of everybody, and he's literally people are losing their minds over this guy. And I think that's got to be the biggest story, especially with all of the, the collusion going on between some government agencies, regular meetings with Twitter employees and FBI people, and all of this going on in a lead up to a 2020 election. I think that's key, that people know it and understand it. Now, whether it's going to be reported as such by any other media other than the conservative side, or maybe even some down the middle people. But right now, I think that could upend how we do our elections eventually.
It's funny you chose that one, Sarah, because I've been following For My Sins, Adam Schiff and Ted Lieu on the Twitterverse specifically, and they've been trying to poo-poo everything that's come out. It's almost as though they have something invested in this not being a true story. Scott, what do you make of Sarah's roundup piece there?
Well, I think that I agree that that is one of the most consequential stories of the year. I think that it's not just that Elon is playing chess and the rest of us are playing, or the rest of them are playing checkers. It's that they have been playing 4D chess all along, and we're now just finding out about it. They've corrupted to the core and made rotten these social media establishments, and Elon is breaking it loose, and it's the exposure that they can't manage and can't suffer through laying bare what they actually did, and it's vile and disgusting, and it's totally corrupt. So I think that looking backwards, we'll think that is as big. I actually disagree that I don't think looking in hindsight will we think that the reference to the committee from the committee's reference to the DOJ for prosecution, to me at least, I just see that as another step down on the staircase to madness for the Trump deranged crowd. It's just a political, what can we do? Like the next thing, rather than something that I think, in 10 years from now, looking back, will we say that was the big thing? But before you respond to me, I'll just say, for me, as the legal affairs editor for Liberty Nation, the reversal of Roe v. Wade and the decision in the New York State rifle and pistol case, I think those historically, looking back, will be the most impactful events of the year.
Let me just add one thing in here, Mark, if I may. Sarah, I was thinking about Twitter, but the problem is that the coverage on this is so poor. There's so many people that don't know about these 6 parts. They don't know. Even fairly dialed in political people are not aware of the 6 or 7 Twitter drops. And so that kind of had me thinking. But on the other hand, Scott, as you mentioned, years and years from now, we will remember those Supreme Court things. I don't know that the Donald Trump thing is going to be remembered. But again, the coverage is the exact opposite of the Twitter thing. Mm-hmm. In other words, we have this screensaver called the newspaper wall, and it's every front page of every newspaper every day. And so if you're just sitting there, like waiting for something, spend a couple minutes, every single newspaper had Trump recommended for indictment, every single newspaper. And I have yet to see the front page of a single newspaper except for the Washington Examiner, I think, or the Times, something like that. Nobody has Twitter.
I think it was Instapundit's Glenn Greenwald that said the goal of the mainstream media is to find these stories that are challenging to the to the establishment and cover them with a pillow until they stop. So that's the coverage that you're seeing.
It's a line for the ages.
One thing I agree with the coverage aspect, but let's face it, Trump sells. Whether you love him or hate him, anytime Trump is in the news, you want to look at it. You want to see what's going on. And, some people are saying, oh, he's being hammered again. And they're lies. And the other people are going, when is he going to go to jail? And so it sells, and it's going to keep, his name in the news as long as it will continue to sell. But I think in hindsight, if we look back, say 5 years or 10 years from now, I think the Twitter thing will become more important than it is because, agreed, nobody's covering it.
Yeah, not that I'm being the judge giving scores on which one's correct, but I think I'm kind of swayed by Sarah's here because it seems to me that it's not just Twitter. It's not just Twitter that was paid more than $3 million by the U.S. government for its assistance in helping out the FBI or whoever, the intelligence agencies that were attempting to use it and utilize it to suppress Americans' free speech. It's not just Twitter, is it? It's Facebook. It's all the other ones who have been in constant communication to what I believe is the detriment of the American people, the democratic process, and the constitutional republic itself. Now, with that rant over, we'll be back with our special Christmas panel to discuss the reindeer games for the former president. Don't go anywhere.
Ho, ho, ho.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone, hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner, joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors, deconstructing leftist narratives, debating the hot topics, and remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.